And that's why I'm not sitting here saying, oh, well, not everything's in mainnet, so I can't support AION. I support them 100% because this is a cool idea and I hope they're successful. What is up, Hash Nation? Today, we are back with Token Talk Tuesday, and we are talking about a highly requested project, and that is the interoperability blockchain AION. AION is a robust smart contract enabled blockchain ecosystem that's really looking to change the way blockchains connect with one another in the widely open and public blockchain world. So without further ado, let's hash it out. And guys, really quickly, before we get started with the content, if it's our first time meeting, my name is Forrest. I'm a blockchain developer in industry. I build dApps for a living, and I started this channel really to just help people come together around this distributed, decentralized technology that is blockchain and cryptocurrency, to educate you and to help people all come together as a community and support this movement. If you want to join that movement, just go ahead and smash that subscribe button to see new content every single week. Click that little bell notification button and well, we can hang out every time I post new content. Thank you guys in advance. Let's go. So guys, like I said in the intro, the AION network is really an interoperability network that is based around their own innovative smart contract enabled blockchain. It was actually created by the AION Foundation, which was created by the same folks behind the popular startup Nuco in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. Now, the work that was done at Nuco started to evolve into what is now AION in 2017, after all of the work that they've been doing culminated in the idea of this interoperability blockchain itself. And now here we are in 2019, and AION has its mainnet product released. They have a wide roadmap of features that are coming in the near future, and we have a pretty fresh and clean new idea of how AION is going to really bridge the gap, figuratively and literally, between all these different disparate blockchains we have in the world today. At the end of 2018, the AION ERC20 tokens were successfully migrated using the same bridge technology that AION uses to create interoperability between blockchains from Ethereum to their AION mainnet. Now we'll talk about how this works and what this means in a few minutes, but what you need to know is that the proof of concept for their bridging technology, the bridge between protocols, effectively worked when they moved their coins from ERC20 over to the AION blockchain. And in 2019, this year, AION's main goal is to move all of their new virtual machine technology, some of the updates to their smart contract platform, into mainnet, and that progress is ongoing and working great. So all this is really good to see from my perspective, to see the technology that they're really touting, the interoperability technology, it worked in practice in front of the world when they moved their ERC20 over to the AION 1 blockchain. AION at its core is built to take the lessons learned from Ethereum, the things that make Ethereum great, and amplify them, but to also take some of the things that Ethereum doesn't do well and to improve upon those in its own design. And one of the key concepts that we hear time and time again in the blockchain and cryptocurrency world is interoperability, amongst other issues like scalability, transaction throughput, all sorts of things. Interoperability is one we hear all the time, and AION's focus has been in interoperability and making their AION 1 blockchain compatible with and to act as a service for other blockchains to communicate with one another in one full network to create what is essentially the internet of blockchains. So with that, let's talk about AION's approach to solving this really difficult problem of having all these different blockchains with all these different protocols and consensus algorithms, etc., to communicate with one another and share state. AION's team actually took inspiration from the way that our internet works today with TCP/IP, which is the core messaging protocol that the internet itself uses, and bringing that same concept into the blockchain world to facilitate messaging between different blockchain protocols wherever they are in the spectrum. Now, the main reason why TCP/IP is so valuable is that it provided a base framework, a standard by which all data was sent, received, and indexed as it's used on the internet in all communications that occur today. Now, obviously, having a standard is very helpful when you're trying to make different protocols talk to each other. So that same idea is what drove the design of what AION is calling the Transwarp Conduit technology, which is essentially the name they've given their bridging technology to have Ethereum communicate with Bitcoin and Ethereum communicate with AION all through the AION technology, Transwarp Conduit. Now, Transwarp Conduit is actually another clever reference to Star Trek, which I think we see a lot of in this space. I think it's because we're all tech, sci-fi guys and girls, and we just love that sort of stuff. But it's really a reference to the transwarp technology that you see, allowing the Star Trek folks to beam themselves from one place to another, or inanimate objects in this case. So it's basically allowing you to beam cryptocurrency transactions from Ethereum over to Bitcoin, so on and so forth. Essentially what this Transwarp Conduit technology does is it establishes that standard messaging protocol for data and state to be modified provably on two blockchains, on the sending and receiving blockchain, no matter where they are in the spectrum, as long as they're using AION's technology. Now, this is by no means a novel idea. There are a lot of platforms out there that are using things like atomic swaps. They're using smart contracts to change state on both ends, regardless of where they are in the spectrum of blockchain technologies. But in this case, AION is taking a much more standardized, widely available approach. AION's real difference maker here is that it's adaptable. It truly is more extensible and more usable for more different protocols, and it doesn't require a vast amount of customization to use the exact same protocol for different blockchain platforms. Now, to illustrate this, AION uses a hub and spoke infrastructure. So the way that this really looks is that you have the AION 1 blockchain here in the center, and then you have spokes, which are other blockchains in this infrastructure. And what connects these spokes to that main hub, which is the AION 1 blockchain, is what they call bridges. And these bridges are essentially the protocol layer, the messaging layer between that blockchain and the AION 1 blockchain, and then subsequently to other blockchain networks. So when you want to communicate, you're essentially feeding that bridge information, and it's coming out the other end in a standard way on both sides. Now, another thing to note here is that each bridge can be commissioned by users. They've created this whole microeconomy around creating bridges between different protocols. So it's not just there's an Ethereum protocol and then there's one bridge from Ethereum to another blockchain. Users can create more bridges and they can create this whole economy around it. I'll explain more in a moment, but let's continue on breaking down the basics. Now, why they've done this and they've allowed different bridges to serve different purposes is because each bridge may need different rules to serve a different use case depending on what the transaction volume is going to be. For example, a game like Crypto Zombies might require a lot more transaction throughput and maybe less security because there's, quite frankly, less value moving through. It's more, my zombie is going to eat this crypto kitty and I'm going to get points, for example. Now, in that case, you would want to set up your bridge to have relatively high levels of throughput, so less rule set strictness, and to allow for less checking against state, and there's not a lot of money moving. So in that case, that bridge would be perfect. But if you're having an escrow service set up for a bank between Ethereum and Bitcoin, you might want really strict rules, and you might want those transactions to be a little bit slower so you can check them, and you can set it up exactly how you want it. So these bridges are designed to be a little bit more extensible and customizable depending on the use case. And it is that customization and adaptability to be used on many different protocols, but to also allow you to set up a bridge with custom rules depending on your use case that makes AION so unique. Now, beyond that, AION's bridges are not just a single tunnel you're feeding information through. It really acts like its own proof of stake chain between two different protocols. So you have consensus and you have a means of validation and a means of economic incentive and disincentive, which is something I harp on all the time because it's crucial. It's the backbone of cryptocurrency. You have that within that bridge itself. So for example, if you have a bridge that's been set up, you can stake as a member of the AION ecosystem on your favorite bridge between Ethereum and the AION 1 blockchain, for example. And then validators within that very staked bridge then help enforce the rules of that given bridge for the transactions that are flowing through. So think of it like this. When you send an email, the central email servers are trying to determine whether or not the address that you're addressing it to actually exists and whether or not your email is spam. If it gets marked as spam or the address doesn't exist, it gets revoked, it gets pushed back, that email doesn't go through. But if it passes the rules, the validation mechanisms within that email server are going to feed your email to where it's supposed to go. Now in this case, the validators work in a very similar way. They are there to help shuffle through the transactions that meet the rules and that meet the criteria. All in all, the concept here really is encapsulated by their slogan, that AION wants to be the protocol to link all protocols. Becoming the Internet of Blockchain provider per se, becoming the protocol designer for the Internet of Blockchains is not an easy task. It's not a small feat, But AION has actually completed quite a bit of work on this very concept, and that's why I wanted to make a video about it and share it with you guys after so many of you had shared it with me and told me to take a look at it. So thank you for those who did. And one of the fringe benefits here that I really noticed as a developer myself, someone who builds a lot of dApps on Ethereum, is that this whole idea here is not excluding smart contract platforms. So for a long time, transaction interoperability has occurred between all UTXOs or all account-based blockchains, but there hasn't been a lot of love for these smart contract platforms. So in this case, if you could use the Transwarp Conduit technology to move your tokens and your dApps and everything over from Ethereum to another protocol, if you find that as you specialized and built more, that you're more fit to use Zilliqa, for example, hint, hint, that's coming to Token Talk Tuesday soon, then you can do that. I think that's a huge value, because when you're building an app right now, you can migrate from Angular over to React. You can migrate from AWS over to Microsoft Azure as your infrastructure. To be able to do that in a blockchain ecosystem would be pretty awesome. So just to illustrate how all this works, now that we understand what it is, let's take an example of a given transaction. Now let's say I want to send a transaction to you from Ethereum over to the AION 1 blockchain, so that main hub blockchain for AION. To do that, I need to use a bridge. And like we said before, that bridge is what connects those two different protocols using that standard messaging Transwarp Conduit module. When I send that transaction through that given bridge, remember our email filter example here, or that analogy, it's basically saying that certain rules have to be met. And here, there are two specific rules that have to get met right away for the validators within that given Transwarp protocol bridge to validate this transaction and let it pass. Rule number one, the signatures on the transaction must be valid. So you can't send something if it's not from a valid key, and you can't send to an invalid recipient. That's the first rule. And the second rule is that the appropriate fee must be paid up front to issue that transaction. So you can't send a transaction with not enough of a fee. The fee goes to the AION validators that are doing the validation for this protocol. If you don't pay the fee, it's not going to go through. Now, after these rules are met, basically what happens is a Byzantine fault-tolerant protocol is running to help determine consensus between all the validators within that channel or that bridge. What that essentially means is that within this bridge, all the validators within it have to basically cast a vote and say, yes, we agree that this transaction should go through, it met the rules, and we think it's valid, or no, we shouldn't, revert it. And to have a transaction go through and for a block to be mined in this case, or for transactions to pass through, there has to be a 2/3 yes vote. So basically a 2/3 majority of the active validators in the channel. This follows traditional Byzantine fault-tolerant probabilities, and that is that 1/3 of nodes could be thought of as malicious, so a 2/3 majority wins. Now, you may be wondering about these validators that I've mentioned so often. How do they get their position? How are they voted on? How are we preventing centralization? All these sorts of things that you might be wondering. Well, let's talk about it. Now, there are a couple ways that you can become an AION validator for a given bridge. And these are self-nominated positions, meaning if you want to be one, you can. All you have to do is either A, you have to stake tokens or AION tokens on a bridge of your choice that you would like to be a validator on, or B, you have to contribute computational resources to a specific computational puzzle, very similar to proof of work in this case. We'll explain that a little more in detail later, but those are your two options. So if you contribute to the network in some way, you can self-nominate to become a validator in a bridge. But within that bridge, the final set of validators is really chosen by a proof of stake, more randomized and fair method, not just whether or not you contribute to the network. Now, that being said, validators that do end up having the right to vote on given transactions within that bridge are selected and elected by backers, which are essentially nodes that select and back their favorite validators within a given bridge. Now, again, there are two ways that backers can back the favorite validator that they have within a bridge, which is staking tokens on that given validator or solving those same computational puzzles and devoting your successful computational puzzle award to that very validator that you would like to be a winner. As the system progresses and as these bridges continue to work, validators are continuously evaluated based on the amount of backing they're getting from their own backers. And only those with the most amount of backing are able to vote in that Byzantine fault-tolerant ecosystem that we talked about just a second ago. But let's talk a little bit about the solving computational puzzles, that proof of work element that we talked about just a moment ago. Now what this is essentially it's an alternative consensus mechanism or sort of game theory consensus process that has been touted by the AION folks. They're actually working on this now. And this is called proof of intelligence. Right out of the gates, proof of intelligence is very similar to proof of work. It's essentially allowing you to stake, in a way, your computational resources or expend computational power to solve a puzzle, which does two things. It, first of all, makes it less likely that it would be economically incentivized for you to denial of service the entire network, and it wouldn't be economically reasonable for you to want to spam the network in general for any given reason. In a basic sense, it makes it very costly and ineffective and stupid for someone to try and issue a denial of service attack to the blockchain and be a spammer. Plain and simple. Where proof of intelligence really differs from proof of work in this case is actually in that the computational resources that are expended are used for something of value to the network. In proof of intelligence, rather than iterating through different hashes like you have in proof of work, rather you have your computational resources pushed towards solving and contributing to advanced neural networks and artificial intelligence models. And these models are not really well defined in what they're going to do for the network yet, but the basic concept here, and I read this in one of the white papers, is that these AI models, these neural networks, are going to then be deployed on the network to help enforce security and other rules. So it's going to be a way to decentralize a little bit more by putting the power more into trained neural network models to enforce rules than just nodes on the network and people who are inherently flawed. So in essence, what you're doing is you're training and contributing to, as a user on the network, to stake on your favorite bridge or validator to neural networks and training those models that will eventually make the network better. And I love this idea because if we're going to be expending the resources that we are to secure the network, we can kill two birds with one stone. We can prevent these different attacks like DOS attacks, Sybil attacks, etc., but we can also contribute to the network in a meaningful way. Proof of intelligence, check, I like it, please implement it, it's in progress. Just to bring it back to what we were talking about, if you were a backer and you were trying to contribute and support or back your favorite validator in a bridge, all you'd have to do is contribute to those neural networks. Say you do a round of training on that with a given neural network model, you're then gonna get a certificate back, or basically a proof back that says, yes, I've completed this amount of work, and then you can put that towards your favorite validator as a stake. Again, this is novel because it's taking a traditionally wasteful process that's necessary for security in many different ways, and you're making it very useful and valuable to the network in a very unique way. So I really like it. Now guys, I just want to pause real quick and share with you something that I've been working on with someone really cool named Crypto Movement. We've actually created Hashoshi merch. So if you're interested in picking up a cool hat or another cool hat, or t-shirts or any sort of thing for the summer, we have both women's and men's, different sizes and different shapes and cool things with my logo and a couple cool designs. It would mean a lot to me if you supported the channel, but of course there is no pressure. I'm not here to sell you stuff, I'm here to share knowledge. So with that, let's get back to the content. Now I want to go back to a point that I made earlier, and that is that there is now this whole economic system around bridges. Because if you remember, any individual node or group of nodes can create their own bridge with their own custom rules. And of course, as someone on the network, you can stake your favorite bridge based on what its qualifications are. Then within that bridge, you can stake and you can participate in proof of intelligence for your favorite validators. So you have a lot of control and a lot of sway, even as an individual node, to guide how the network is going. And it's very similar to torrenting in a way, where if you look and you have a list of like torrents that you can get, right? If you look at the one, you're always gonna pick the one with the most seeders, right? Because it's gonna be the fastest download. You want the one that basically everyone's voting confidence in by becoming a seeder and everyone's on that, right? You don't go to the one that has one leecher and it's sitting at the bottom of the list. It's the very same way. Bridges then become a commodity that are voted upon based on how good they are. So the incentive becomes, this bridge needs to be efficient, needs to be fast, needs to do what we say it does, and it can't be malicious, right? So then you have this amazing bridge that everyone wants to stake on. And everyone internally then gets to be rewarded for that great work that they're doing within that bridge. Now, of course, in my opinion, the first thing that I thought of when I was reading this white paper is, In this environment, how do you prevent the wealthiest parties from then becoming the most powerful parties in this space? And I think one of the ways of doing that is through proof of intelligence, because I feel like contributing to that model is a lot different than just having a lot of money to stake tokens and throw your weight around in terms of your wealth. In my opinion, more can be done, and that is one constructive criticism that I have. If AION can come up with more ways to make this network more reputation based and less about stake, I think it would be very helpful. So maybe taking a page out of a reputation system using the AION ecosystem. I think they can do it. I'm sure they're already thinking about it, but that's something that I'd like to see in the near future. Now, another thing that's important to note is the coin rewards. So AION currently does offer coin rewards or token rewards for the validators and backers and all the people who participate in this ecosystem in general. Similar to why we love things like Bitcoin, the inflation of the AION supply, or the token supply for the AION network, it is only driven by the network moving forward in a meaningful way. So when these rewards come, 1% of the overall supply of AION tokens are released by natural occurrence of validators being rewarded and doing what they're supposed to do. So there's a total supply of 460 million AION coins or tokens that will be released in existence forever. That's a fixed supply, and then 1% annually are released as inflation throughout the normal operation of the network. As you know, I'm a big fan of these nuanced token economics things, and I think that it's very important to the way that these protocols move forward unless they've made significant strides in consensus itself to make the token economics less meaningful. As you also know, I'm a big fan of innovative tech, and I've had the chance lately to work with artificial intelligence and machine learning models. I've gotten my feet wet in building neural networks, and the fact that they're integrating this technology into blockchain is music to my ears, because I think all these technologies work together like a symphony. It shouldn't be a blockchain and that's it. It shouldn't be a neural network and that's it. These technologies work together great. So big thumbs up to AION for bringing neural networks and artificial intelligence into the mix, even if they're not sure how exactly it's going to be used yet. But I think they have a pretty good idea. And all that said, as you know, I'm a developer, so there's a lot to say about AION from a developer's perspective. And again, you'll know if you watch Token Talk Tuesdays, I'm all about documentation. I'm all about video tutorials. I'm all about having a smart contract language that doesn't suck. So let's talk about it. I must say the people behind AION know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, and they're doing this in a smart way. First and foremost, the AION network is really reliant on Java. Java, for those of you who don't know, is one of the first, if not the first, really well-adopted object-oriented programming language out there. It has a really solid virtual machine that helps translate the code you're writing into executable, computer-understood information, basically, or commands. And I really like the idea of having the millions of Java developers in the world able to have access to and understand this protocol from day one. So right now they have a basic virtual machine that works. It does what it's supposed to do. In their phase 2, which is called Denali, and that is their phase 2 roadmap, they're working on something called the AVM, or the AION Virtual Machine. That is going to be a customized Java virtual machine implementation that is specialized for their smart contracts that will be written in Java, the language. And if I look at a project that has smart contracts, or they talk about smart contracts, and they haven't in their roadmap put up there in bold letters, virtual machine is important, then it deters me. If they haven't thought about how that virtual machine is going to improve on what we have today, it makes me feel like they're not taking it seriously. So the fact that roadmap item after mainnet, the first thing was, we're going to rebuild our virtual machine and make it great, that's a good thing. Another thing is that since this virtual machine and the smart contracts will be written and composed of Java, the 9+ million, that's being conservative, Java developers in the world can very easily get involved and start using this language from day one. And like I said a million times on my videos, if you want your platform to be successful, you have to have people building stuff. To have people building stuff, you have to have good training, you have to have good docs. But it makes your life a lot easier if you have a language that people already know, that they're already gonna feel at home building dApps. They're already gonna feel at home building peripheral things for your protocol itself. So that's also a great thing. And again, like most other parties, they're taking a lot of time in their virtual machine to make code extremely provable, easily auditable, extremely high assurance so that it works the way it's supposed to when it gets deployed in a public environment. If you've watched my Plutus video, I'll link that above. I talked a lot about that and how it compares as a functional language to Solidity, which has had a lot of problems. Granted, Java is not a functional language, it's a very object-oriented language, but they're trying to take the concept of creating highly provable, very predictable code and making it super effective with their virtual machine in terms of execution time. So this virtual machine is coming with its own scripting language, which again will be based on Java, and that scripting language is going to be called AION. Another thing, too many AIONs. I get confused because there's too many things named AION. There's like AION Network, AION Foundation, AION Language, AION everything. So AION Virtual Machine. Let's come up with a cool name for the language, share it with the AION people. Leave me a comment down below what you think the AION scripting language should be, the smart contract language, and yeah, let's get that changed. But name aside, the language has been built defensively, and when I say defensively, it's been built understanding some of the pitfalls that there are in distributed environments that people can fall into, and there have been a lot of code hardening measures taken during the development of the AION scripting language itself. So the whole idea here, I think, is to make a Java-based language that feels the same, that's syntactically similar, but also has the injection of blockchain runtime environment information that it needs. It has context injection, little things that make things a lot easier, a lot more efficient. I think this is a great move. So again, I think another thing they need to really focus on is as the scripting language throughout this phase 2 development process comes out, they need to really release documentation that supports everything they're doing. They need to release tutorials on how to use it, how to set up a local environment, how to build an application, put up GitHub repositories with example projects. They have stuff like that now, but as the scripting language comes out, they need to do the same thing again. But you can currently test out both the scripting language and the AVM on their testnets. You can set it up. There's a lot of good documentation out there. I've been pretty impressed with what they have so far. You can never have enough in my opinion, but I'm impressed with what they have so far. Best part though from their documentation is they have videos. I mean, videos. Thank you for videos. On YouTube, they have a bunch of videos showing you how to do something at the keyboard, how to set it up, explaining things. Love that. I really love that. For me, I spend hours learning stuff every single day for these videos, for my job as I build things. And it's great when you just have it there in front of you so you can learn what you want to learn without reading 1,000 documents that may be poorly formatted or not in English and whatever. It really helps. So hats off to AION for having videos. And also, as we've talked about the Denali release, which is their phase 2 roadmap, I think it's important to talk about the phase 3, which is aptly named Everest. So it's the peak functionality for their minimum valuable product. I don't think it's the last thing they're ever gonna build for AION, but Everest really represents the functionality that they have planned, that they want to release, that's gonna make it work the way that they want. Everest is going to bring final modifications and updates and refinements to the bridge technology, the Transwarp Conduit stuff they already have. It's going to make interoperability fully possible between as many protocols as possible. And one really killer feature that I've noticed, that's cross-chain contract execution. So it's going to allow you to execute a contract in multiple blockchains, and that would open up the entire world for game developers. If you're on the Loom network and you wanna issue a token collectible on Ethereum, you can execute the same contract in multiple places. You can scale horizontally and vertically doing that, and I think that's a great idea. And finally, they're going to bring the full stack, full suite of proof of stake validator processing capabilities and voting capabilities that aren't quite there in mainnet yet. And then at the very end of the Everest release, it's probably going to be when they release the version 2 of the AION virtual machine, which they're targeting finishing within this year. So right now on the roadmap, Everest is slated to release at the end of 2019. I will conservatively say I think it's probably going to be in 2020, and I think it's going to line up really well with all of these Cardano and Ethereum updates. Best case scenario, Cardano and Ethereum can, rather than fight with each other, jump on this AION network business and start to work together a little bit, which I think we should be doing. I think AION's being a little ambitious, saying 2019 they're going to have 2 entire roadmap feature sets released. I think it's going to be 2019 and 2020, maybe midway through 2020, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. Beyond that, I think it's very important for us to consider that all these platforms, Ethereum 2.0, Cardano wants to get everything in mainnet. There's a lot of projects out there that are doing big things. AION could make a big splash if they can deliver at least most of their features in 2019. I think they could be one of the top projects in terms of technical capability, they can deliver on all of this that I've been reading in their white paper. And to me, I don't think it's insane or crazy that they're going up this road. I also don't think AION is a direct competitor with Ethereum or Cardano or really any of these platforms. I think they're doing something so different, and they're really trying to bring these projects together, which I think is a great message, rather than trying to compete as a smart contract platform or compete as a dApp platform with sharding and all that sort of stuff. They're not doing that. Really, they're trying to become the provider for protocol service that is the Internet of Blockchains, or the enabling force to enable the Internet of Blockchains. And if this is successful, it can really drive dApp usage, it can drive transaction volume and throughput and all these things. You can take the value propositions for all these different networks like Zilliqa, like Ethereum, etc., and bring them together in a meaningful way. I have complete support for this idea. And that's why I'm not sitting here saying, oh, well, not everything's in mainnet, so I can't support AION. I support them 100% because this is a cool idea, and I hope they're successful. I have no control over whether or not they are or they aren't successful, but I believe that they can do it, and I hope they do. All in all, AION is a platform, the AION network, that has its own blockchain, the AION one, that's smart contract enabled, that has a really compelling virtual machine offering coming down the pipeline. But the real claim to fame, the real killer feature about the AION network is these bridges, these unique proof of stake bridges that can connect different protocols with one another in a seamless fashion. Now, obviously, more testing has to be done. I want to see platforms get on this year and show that it works just beyond Ethereum to AION 1. I want to see Ethereum to AION 1 to Bitcoin, something like that. That would really drive this point home in the eyes of many, including myself. Their roadmap is succinct. It has 3 phases. They don't have a lot of random promises of non-well-defined features. Everything they've been claiming is pretty well defined. They've explained it, and when they haven't been able to implement, they've told us why, and that's why proof of intelligence is taking a little longer. They're trying to flesh it out, so mad respect there. Again, guys, I'm gonna drive this home with one final point, and that is that we should all support projects like this that are doing something so different. Even if they are doing it slowly, like Ethereum is, etc., we should definitely support, band together, understand what they're doing, and just cross our fingers, because this space is not going away. We all have to contribute to the distributed technology, the decentralized technologies that we actually want, and I think AION is going in the right direction there. So with that, guys, don't forget to check out more of my content here or here. I'll link them on the screen here for you to click. Thank you guys, as always, for watching these videos. I couldn't do it without you. Cheers.